The city never truly slept. Long after midnight, its skyline shimmered beneath a blanket of neon lights, where wealth and ambition hid behind polished glass and expensive smiles. Among the towers overlooking the river stood Adrian Moretti's most celebrated nightclub, a place where celebrities, politicians, and business elites gathered beneath dazzling chandeliers and deafening music. To the outside world, Adrian was the billionaire owner whose success seemed effortless. To Isabella, he was the man who had somehow become both her greatest comfort and her greatest danger. She stood on the private balcony above the dance floor, watching the crowd move like waves beneath her. The soft evening breeze carried distant laughter, blending with the rhythm of the music echoing from below. Adrian stepped beside her, slipping an arm around her waist with the confidence of someone who believed the world belonged to him. "You always disappear when the party starts," he said with a faint smile. "I like watching people more than joining them," Isabella replied. He chuckled quietly. "You're impossible to read." She returned a playful smile, though her heartbeat betrayed her calm expression. If only he knew how true those words really were. To everyone watching, they looked inseparable. Photographers adored them. Gossip magazines called them the city's perfect power couple. They traveled together, attended glamorous charity galas, and appeared endlessly devoted to one another. Their affection seemed genuine because much of it truly was. That truth frightened Isabella more than any lie she had ever told. Later that evening, the limousine carried them through silent streets lined with luxury apartments and glowing storefronts. Adrian rested comfortably beside her, scrolling through messages on his phone before locking the screen. "Weekend in Monaco?" he asked. She glanced towards the window before answering. "That sounds nice. You don't sound convinced." "I'm just tired." He studied her for a moment, searching her face as though trying to solve a puzzle hidden beneath flawless features. Then the moment passed. He kissed her forehead gently, and the conversation drifted elsewhere. When Adrian finally fell asleep after they returned home, Isabella slipped carefully from the bed. Every movement was deliberate. She crossed the apartment without making a sound, retrieved a small handbag from the wardrobe, and quietly left through a private entrance. Outside, the city felt different without the glamour. The empty streets reflected pale moonlight, while distant sirens reminded her that another world existed beyond luxury. She entered a quiet underground parking garage several blocks away. There, beneath flickering fluorescent lights, she unlocked an ordinary gray sedan that looked entirely out of place among expensive vehicles. Inside, her smile disappeared. She removed a secure mobile phone hidden beneath the driver's seat. Its encrypted screen illuminated her face. After confirming the surroundings were clear, she pressed a single contact. "This is Sparrow," she whispered. "Daily report." A calm voice answered. "Proceed." She summarized Adrian's movements, the meetings he had attended, and the names she had overheard during the evening. Every detail mattered. Every conversation might become evidence someday. "You've maintained excellent access," the voice replied. "Continue observing. Do not accelerate the operation." "I understand." The call ended after less than 2 minutes. For several seconds she remained motionless, staring at her own reflection in the dark windscreen. The woman looking back no longer resembled the glamorous socialite admired across the city. She looked exhausted. "I never meant for this to become real," she murmured to herself. She locked the phone away and returned before dawn, slipping back into bed without waking Adrian. As the first rays of sunlight entered the bedroom, Adrian opened his eyes and watched Isabella sleeping peacefully beside him. A gentle smile crossed his face before fading into thoughtful silence. Something about the previous weeks lingered in his mind, a feeling he could neither explain nor ignore. He reached for her hand, holding it carefully as though afraid it might disappear. Neither of them realized that love had already become the most dangerous secret they shared, and that one hidden truth would soon begin unraveling everything they believed about each other. Morning sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Adrian Moretti's penthouse, but warmth never seemed to linger there. Isabella awoke to find his side of the bed already empty. The memory of the previous night's encrypted report weighed heavily on her mind as she dressed and made her way downstairs. Adrian stood in the kitchen, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, reading financial reports while sipping black coffee. He looked every bit the successful entrepreneur the public admired. When he noticed Isabella, his stern expression softened into an affectionate smile. "You're awake," he said. "I thought I'd let you sleep." She smiled back. "Long night. They all seem to be lately." The remark sounded casual, yet it lingered in the silence between them. By midday, Adrian was touring another of his luxury properties, accompanied by lawyers, accountants, and investors. His portfolio stretched far beyond glamorous nightclubs. Hotels, restaurants, shipping firms, construction companies, and high-end real estate all carried the Moretti name. Newspapers praised his remarkable business instincts, while television interviews celebrated his charitable donations and urban redevelopment projects. Everything appeared legitimate. That appearance had taken years to perfect. Behind carefully audited books and polished corporate offices existed another empire invisible to ordinary eyes. Offshore accounts quietly absorbed millions in laundered money. Shipping containers transported more than imported goods. Local business owners who resisted paying protection soon reconsidered after carefully orchestrated acts of intimidation. Those who became serious liabilities rarely remained problems for long. Adrian never issued violent orders in crowded rooms or over recorded phones. Instructions traveled through trusted intermediaries, wrapped inside ordinary conversations and coded language that left little trace. His organization valued silence above loyalty because silence survived longer. To the authorities, Adrian remained frustratingly untouchable. To those working beneath him, he was respected as much as feared. Yet despite controlling an empire built upon calculated brutality, Adrian insisted on one rule within his private life: never lie to him. Late that afternoon, Isabella joined him for lunch at an elegant waterfront restaurant reserved exclusively for invited guests. They laughed over childhood stories, discussed holiday plans, and shared quiet moments that seemed entirely genuine. Anyone watching would have seen two people deeply in love. Then Isabella's phone vibrated. She glanced down for only a second before silencing it without reading the message. Adrian noticed. "Someone important?" he asked. "Just marketing emails." She reached for her drink almost immediately. The explanation sounded reasonable. Still, something about her reaction settled uneasily inside him. Hours later, they returned to one of Adrian's flagship nightclubs before opening time. Employees hurried across polished floors, while technicians adjusted lights and sound systems. Adrian greeted everyone by name, earning grateful smiles from bartenders, cleaners, and security staff alike. His generosity toward employees strengthened the public image he carefully cultivated. Isabella wandered through the empty venue, occasionally stopping to admire new decorations. She paused longer than expected beside a restricted corridor leading towards private offices. When Adrian called her name, she turned almost too quickly. "Everything all right?" he asked. "I was looking for the ladies' room." He nodded slowly. "It isn't that direction." She laughed awkwardly. "I suppose I should pay more attention." He smiled, though his thoughts remained elsewhere. That evening, another small moment unsettled him. During dinner, Isabella asked an unusually specific question about one of his shipping companies. "Do all your cargo vessels follow the same routes every month?" The question seemed innocent enough. He answered without hesitation. "Mostly." "Why?" "I was curious. Since when are shipping schedules interesting?" She shrugged. "I like learning about your businesses." He accepted the explanation, but his instincts resisted the comfort her words offered. Adrian had spent years surviving among dangerous people by recognizing patterns others ignored. Tiny inconsistencies often revealed devastating truths. A delayed glance, an unexpected question, a phone quickly hidden. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they whispered that something beneath the surface had begun to shift. That night, while Isabella slept peacefully beside him, Adrian remained awake, staring into darkness. He replayed every recent conversation, every unusual pause, every forgotten detail. For the first time since falling in love, a single unwelcome thought entered his mind. What if the woman he trusted most was keeping secrets even greater than his own? Sleep never truly found Adrian that night. Isabella rested beside him, her breathing slow and peaceful, while his mind replayed every unanswered question from recent weeks. He disliked suspicion because it clouded judgment, yet experience had taught him that instinct rarely appeared without reason. By dawn, he had decided on one rule. He would watch, not accuse. If he was wrong, Isabella would never know he had doubted her. The opportunity arrived sooner than expected. That afternoon, Isabella excused herself to meet a fashion consultant before an upcoming charity gala. She kissed Adrian goodbye, promising she would return before dinner. He watched her leave from his office window until her car disappeared into city traffic. He tried focusing on contracts spread across his desk, but concentration refused to return. An hour later, he left the office and drove to Isabella's apartment, intending to surprise her with flowers if she had already come home. The building was silent. Using the key she had given him months earlier, Adrian stepped inside. Fresh lilies stood in a crystal vase near the entrance, filling the apartment with a gentle fragrance. Everything appeared exactly as it always had. A folded blanket rested on the sofa. Books remained neatly arranged on floating shelves. Nothing suggested hidden danger. He placed the flowers on the kitchen counter and waited. Minutes passed. Restless, Adrian wandered through the apartment, studying photographs of happier days. One frame showed them laughing aboard a yacht beneath a brilliant sunset. Another captured them dancing at a charity fundraiser. Every memory felt authentic. As he turned to leave, his shoulder brushed against a small decorative table. A leather handbag slipped onto the floor, its contents scattered across the polished wood. "I'm sorry," he muttered instinctively, kneeling to gather everything. Lipstick, keys, a notebook. Then something unfamiliar caught his attention. A slim black mobile phone without any identifying marks. He frowned. Isabella already carried another phone every day. He had seen it countless times. This one looked different, heavier, built for function rather than appearance. Curiosity overcame hesitation. He pressed the power button. The screen illuminated immediately, displaying an encrypted security interface instead of an ordinary home screen. No photographs, no messages, no contacts, only a request for a complex authentication code. Adrian tried nothing further. He stared at the device for several long seconds before switching it off. His heartbeat remained steady, yet something inside him shifted. People living ordinary lives did not hide encrypted phones beneath handbags. He carefully returned every item exactly where he had found it, making certain nothing appeared disturbed. When Isabella arrived later that evening, she embraced him warmly. "You brought flowers," she said, smiling. "I thought you'd like them. They're beautiful." She seemed genuinely pleased. Over dinner, they talked about travel plans, favorite restaurants, and an upcoming charity auction. Isabella laughed easily, meeting his eyes without hesitation. Adrian answered naturally, never allowing his discovery to influence his expression. Not once did she mention the second phone. That silence unsettled him more than any explanation could have. After midnight, once Isabella had fallen asleep, Adrian stepped quietly onto the balcony overlooking the glittering skyline. He unlocked his personal mobile and called someone whose number he rarely used. A calm male voice answered immediately. "Yes, I need information," Adrian said. "About whom?" He hesitated only briefly. "Someone close to me. No names over the phone. I'll send a photograph." The man paused. Understood. Quietly, completely quietly, the call ended. Adrian slipped the phone back into his pocket and gazed across the sleeping city. He wanted evidence, not assumptions. Whatever Isabella was hiding, he intended to uncover it without alerting her. Inside the apartment, Isabella stirred slightly in her sleep, unaware that one accidental discovery had begun dismantling the trust between them. By morning, Adrian's private investigation would already be in motion, and every hidden step Isabella took would slowly draw another unseen observer into her carefully constructed world. By sunrise, Adrian's instructions were already moving through channels that rarely failed him. He never asked careless questions, and the people working quietly on his behalf never demanded explanations. A photograph of Isabella had been delivered through secure means, followed by a simple order. Learn everything. Leave no trace. If she noticed even the smallest shadow following her, the operation would be worthless. Outwardly, nothing changed. Adrian continued taking Isabella to elegant restaurants, business receptions, and private charity events. He held her hand in public, laughed at her jokes, and kissed her goodbye each morning with convincing affection. Only the silence behind his eyes had changed. Every smile she offered became another detail to analyze. Every unexpected phone call, every unexplained delay, every distracted glance quietly settled into an invisible collection of unanswered questions. Isabella sensed the difference without understanding its cause. He still treated her kindly, yet something warm had disappeared from his gaze. The effortless trust she once saw there had become careful observation. She reminded herself that living undercover meant accepting constant uncertainty, but the emotional weight had become harder to carry than any danger she had anticipated. That evening, she drove alone through quiet streets before parking several blocks from an abandoned warehouse district. She checked her mirrors twice before continuing on foot. Rain had left the pavement shining beneath scattered streetlights, while distant trains echoed across the empty industrial landscape. Inside an aging storage building, a single office remained illuminated. Detective Marcus Hale waited beside a metal table covered with files and photographs. Unlike television detectives, Marcus carried no dramatic confidence. Years investigating organized crime had replaced certainty with patience. His calm expression rarely changed, even when reviewing the darkest evidence. "You weren't followed?" he asked. "I don't think so. Thinking isn't enough. I checked 3 times. He nodded, accepting the answer. Isabella removed a sealed envelope from her coat and placed it carefully onto the table. "Financial records," she said quietly. "Shipping schedules. Several names connected to offshore accounts." Marcus examined the documents without opening them. "You've done well. It doesn't feel that way." His attention shifted towards her. "What happened?" She hesitated before answering. "He's changing." "Explain." "He watches me differently now. Nothing obvious, but it's there." Marcus remained silent, allowing her to continue. "I don't know whether it's instinct or coincidence. You've maintained your cover for years." "I know." "Then trust your training." She looked away. "It's becoming difficult." Marcus understood immediately. This isn't about operational pressure. She closed her eyes briefly. "No, it's Adrian." Her silence became the answer. Marcus folded his hands together. "You were prepared for this possibility." "I was prepared to pretend," she whispered. "I wasn't prepared for feelings that stopped pretending." The detective spoke gently. "People like Adrian survive by manipulating emotions. Don't mistake calculated kindness for innocence. I've seen another side of him. You've seen the side he wanted you to see." His words landed heavily. Isabella knew the evidence pointed towards organized crime, yet the man she shared quiet dinners with seemed completely different from the ruthless figure described inside investigative reports. Holding those opposing realities together had become emotionally exhausting. Marcus finally opened the envelope. "If these records connect properly, we'll have another piece of the network." "Will it be enough?" "Not yet." "How much longer?" "As long as necessary." She nodded, though disappointment lingered across her face. Years had passed since volunteering for the undercover assignment. Every decision, every fabricated memory, every carefully constructed lie had slowly erased parts of her original identity. Sometimes she wondered whether Isabella still existed beneath the role she played each day. When she finally left the warehouse, Marcus watched from the doorway until her car disappeared into darkness. Neither of them noticed another vehicle parked several streets away. Inside, a man lowered a camera after capturing several distant photographs. He reached for his phone. "I found something," he said quietly, "and you're going to want to see where she goes next." The anonymous caller ended the conversation without another word. Somewhere across the city, photographs were already traveling toward Adrian Moretti, while Isabella drove home believing her secret meeting had remained invisible. She noticed nothing unusual in the traffic behind her, yet an uneasy feeling refused to leave. Memories she had spent years burying slowly resurfaced, carrying her back to the moment her life had changed forever. Years earlier, Isabella had stood outside a crowded courthouse beneath a cold autumn sky. Reporters filled the entrance, asking questions no grieving daughter could answer. Inside the building, officials announced that the investigation into Detective Anthony Russo's murder had reached another dead end. No suspects would face charges. No arrests had been made. Another organized crime killing had quietly disappeared into silence. Her father had devoted 2 decades to dismantling powerful criminal networks. He believed patience and evidence would eventually defeat even the most untouchable organizations. Instead, he became another unsolved case buried beneath paperwork and fading headlines. At his funeral, colleagues spoke about courage and sacrifice. Isabella remembered only the empty chair beside her mother. Weeks later, she returned to police headquarters carrying a single request. "I want to join the organized crime division." The senior commander looked at her carefully. "This isn't revenge." "It isn't." "Then tell me why." She answered without hesitation. "Because people like the ones who killed my father depend on everyone eventually giving up." "I'm not going to." Her determination impressed everyone, but determination alone earned no special treatment. Isabella completed years of demanding physical training, investigative coursework, surveillance exercises, psychological evaluations, and undercover preparation. She learned to memorize false identities until they felt genuine. She practiced reading dangerous people without revealing emotion. Every lesson demanded patience, discipline, and absolute control. Eventually, one assignment changed everything. An intelligence briefing introduced a familiar name, Adrian Moretti. Officially, he remained a respected businessman whose companies generated thousands of jobs and millions in tax revenue. Unofficially, investigators believed he controlled an international criminal organization responsible for money laundering, extortion, corruption, and carefully arranged contract killings. Despite years of surveillance, no witness had survived long enough to connect him directly to violent crimes. The department needed someone capable of entering Adrian's trusted circle without attracting suspicion. Isabella volunteered before anyone else could speak. Detective Marcus Hale objected immediately. "You're too personally invested. I know exactly what's at stake. That's precisely why I'm concerned." She refused to withdraw. Months later, after constructing an entirely new identity, Isabella attended an exclusive charity gala where Adrian served as host. Their first meeting lasted less than 5 minutes. He complimented her intelligence instead of her appearance, asking thoughtful questions rather than delivering rehearsed charm. She answered confidently while quietly observing every detail around him. The operation had begun. Over the following months, she gradually earned Adrian's trust through carefully managed encounters that appeared entirely accidental. Conversations became dinners. Dinners became weekends away. Eventually, genuine affection developed where calculated deception had once existed. That unexpected change frightened her more than entering the criminal world itself. She saw Adrian laughing with employees, supporting struggling businesses, donating generously to children's hospitals, and treating her with sincere tenderness. None of those moments erased the growing evidence connecting his empire to organized crime, yet they complicated every decision she made. Late one evening, Marcus reviewed surveillance reports inside the investigation office. "You've crossed an emotional line," he said quietly. "I'm still completing every assignment. I'm not questioning your professionalism." "Then what are you questioning?" "Your objectivity." She lowered her eyes. "I don't know how to separate the man from the investigation anymore." Marcus sighed heavily. "That's exactly what undercover work does. It blurs reality until every choice hurts someone." Back in the present, Isabella parked outside Adrian's penthouse and sat motionless before going inside. She wiped away tears that had arrived without warning, forced a composed smile across her face, and stepped into the life she had carefully constructed. She never realized that Adrian had already received the photographs, and the fragile balance between love, deception, and truth was about to shatter beyond repair. The photographs lay silently across Adrian Moretti's desk as morning light filtered through the tall windows of his private office. Each image showed Isabella entering an abandoned warehouse district and leaving nearly an hour later. The pictures revealed no conversations, no exchange of evidence, and no obvious crime. Yet they confirmed something Adrian could no longer dismiss. She had been living a life beyond the one they shared. He dismissed everyone except his most trusted lieutenant, Luca Romano. Luca had served Adrian for over 15 years. Calm, disciplined, and fiercely loyal, he rarely spoke unless necessary. If Adrian trusted anyone completely, it was him. "What do you think?" Adrian asked. Luca studied the photographs carefully. She wasn't meeting friends. "No. Do you want me to continue watching her?" Adrian hesitated before answering. Quietly, "I want facts, not assumptions." "You'll have both." Within hours, Luca assembled a discreet surveillance team that blended effortlessly into the city's endless movement. They avoided obvious patterns, changed vehicles frequently, and never approached Isabella directly. Days passed without significant discoveries. She visited cafes, attended charity meetings, accompanied Adrian to public events, and appeared exactly as expected. Then everything changed. Late one evening, a routine security inspection uncovered a miniature listening device hidden beneath the conference table inside one of Adrian's private offices. The room was reserved exclusively for confidential meetings involving senior members of his organization. Adrian stared silently at the tiny transmitter resting inside an evidence bag. "Has anyone entered this room recently?" he asked. The security chief nodded. "Only authorized personnel. Search every property." The order spread immediately. Luxury apartments, warehouses, offices, vehicles, and storage facilities underwent meticulous inspections. By sunrise, technicians had discovered 2 additional surveillance devices hidden inside separate buildings connected to Adrian's business network. Someone had been listening. At nearly the same time, accountants reviewing internal financial records reported another disturbing pattern. Several confidential transaction files had disappeared from secure digital archives. No money was missing, only documents. The combination unsettled Adrian more than financial theft ever could. Money could be replaced. Information could destroy entire empires. Meanwhile, Luca remained focused on Isabella. One rainy afternoon, he watched from inside an unmarked vehicle as she left Adrian's penthouse carrying a simple leather handbag. She followed an indirect route through crowded streets before arriving near the same industrial district shown in earlier photographs. Luca maintained a careful distance. Through a telephoto camera, he captured Isabella entering the familiar storage building. Nearly 40 minutes later, another figure arrived. Detective Marcus Hale. Luca recognized him immediately from police intelligence files. He photographed Marcus entering through the same side door. No physical contact occurred outside. No conversation could be heard, but both individuals disappeared inside together. That alone answered every question Adrian had feared asking. Luca remained until they exited separately. Marcus drove away first. Isabella waited several minutes before leaving alone. Back at Adrian's office, Luca placed printed photographs across the polished desk beside the earlier images. "I verified his identity twice," he said quietly. Adrian looked at Marcus's face without blinking. "A detective. Organized crime division." Silence filled the room. Adrian finally lifted another photograph showing Isabella approaching the warehouse entrance. His voice remained calm. "How long?" "We don't know." He closed his eyes briefly. Every shared holiday, every promise, every whispered conversation before sunrise, every quiet evening that had felt completely genuine. Now each memory demanded another interpretation. Had every smile been rehearsed? Had every embrace concealed another report? The betrayal reached far beyond business. It settled somewhere much deeper. Luca spoke carefully. "What are your orders?" Adrian continued staring at the photographs. "No sudden moves. You still trust her?" "I trust nothing." He gathered every photograph into a single folder before locking it inside his desk. "If she's working with law enforcement, she'll expect panic. And instead, Adrian's expression hardened. We give her certainty. Outside, thunder rolled across the city as rain struck the windows in steady waves. Inside the penthouse that evening, Isabella greeted Adrian with the same warm smile she had worn countless times before. He smiled back just as naturally. Neither acknowledged the invisible war already unfolding between them, or realized that their next private conversation would decide whether love survived another day. The quiet peace inside the penthouse lasted only 2 more days. Adrian smiled when Isabella smiled, shared meals without complaint, and continued every familiar routine. Beneath that carefully controlled composure, however, certainty had replaced suspicion. The photographs, the surveillance devices, and Luca's report had woven together into a truth he could no longer ignore. Rather than confront her before witnesses or hidden microphones, he invited her to spend the weekend at his secluded countryside estate, a place where they had once imagined building a future together. Isabella accepted without hesitation. The estate rested beyond rolling vineyards and dense forests, protected by high stone walls and iron gates. It had always felt like an escape from the relentless pace of the city. As they arrived that afternoon, sunlight stretched across the gardens, illuminating fountains and ancient oak trees. The beauty surrounding them felt strangely disconnected from the storm gathering beneath the surface. They walked through the grounds in silence. Finally, Adrian stopped beside a quiet lake reflecting the fading sky. "I've been thinking about us," he said. She looked towards him with cautious curiosity. "So have I." He studied her face for several long moments before reaching into his jacket. Without speaking, he placed a thick envelope onto a nearby stone bench. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside were photographs. One showed her entering the abandoned warehouse. Another captured Detective Marcus Hale arriving shortly afterwards. Several more documented different meetings across recent weeks. The color drained from Isabella's face. "You had me followed. I had no choice." She closed the envelope slowly. "When did you stop trusting me? The better question is when you started lying." Silence settled between them. Birdsong echoed across the lake before fading into the evening breeze. "I can explain," she whispered. "Please do." She looked directly into his eyes, abandoning every rehearsed excuse she had prepared during years undercover. "I'm an undercover police officer." The words lingered heavily. "I was assigned to investigate your organization." Adrian laughed once, though no amusement reached his expression. "So it was all planned. At first, I never expected to fall in love with you." He turned away. "Don't. It's true. Don't insult me by calling deception love." She stepped closer. "I lied about my identity. You lied about everything. I didn't lie about how I felt." His voice hardened. "Every kiss. No. Every promise. No. Every future we imagined. Those were real." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know which memories belong to us anymore." Tears gathered in Isabella's eyes. "I wanted to tell you so many times. Yet you kept reporting to them. My duty didn't erase my feelings. And your feelings didn't erase your duty." She could not argue. Both statements were painfully true. "I've seen the man you are with me," she said quietly. "I've also seen evidence connecting your empire to terrible crimes. I couldn't ignore either reality. You think you know me. I know enough to believe you still have a choice." He looked towards the calm water, struggling against emotions that refused to obey reason. For years he had built his life around control. Every negotiation, every alliance, every threat depended upon reading people accurately. Yet the woman standing before him had defeated every instinct he trusted. He loved her. He hated her. He mourned the future they had imagined even while believing she had destroyed it herself. "I wish we'd met under different circumstances," Isabella whispered. "So do I." The words carried genuine sorrow. For one fragile moment neither spoke. They simply stood together as daylight disappeared beyond the trees, surrounded by memories now poisoned by uncertainty. When Adrian finally faced her again, something inside him had changed. The warmth she once recognized in his eyes had disappeared completely. In its place remained a cold determination that frightened her more than anger ever could. Without another word, He turned towards the estate house, leaving Isabella alone beside the darkening lake, unaware that the next sunrise would become the most tragic morning of both their lives. Morning arrived beneath a sky heavy with gray clouds, yet the estate remained unnaturally quiet. Isabella barely slept after Adrian walked away the previous evening. His silence had frightened her more than shouting ever could. She wandered onto the terrace shortly after sunrise, hoping the calm landscape might steady the storm inside her. The gardens, once filled with shared laughter and impossible dreams, now felt like the stage for an ending neither of them had wanted. Inside the house, Adrian stood alone in his study. He had spent the entire night replaying every memory they had created together. Their first meeting, their holidays, their whispered promises before dawn. Every cherished moment now collided with photographs, surveillance reports, and the confession she had delivered beside the lake. He searched desperately for one memory untouched by deception and found none he could fully trust. Love had become inseparable from betrayal. When Isabella entered the room, she paused several feet away. "We can't leave things like this," she said softly. Adrian remained facing the window. "I've been thinking. So have I." She stepped closer. "I know you feel betrayed. You know nothing about what I feel. I know enough to understand why you're angry." He finally turned towards her. "Angry?" His voice remained remarkably calm. "You believe this is anger?" She lowered her eyes. "What would you call it?" "The collapse of everything I believed." Silence stretched between them. "I never wanted to destroy you," Isabella whispered. "You already have." She fought back tears. "I wanted you to walk away from this life. You wanted to arrest me. I wanted to save whoever was still capable of being saved." Adrian laughed bitterly. "You still think redemption was possible. I wouldn't have stayed if I didn't." Those words struck deeper than any accusation. For one impossible moment, Adrian imagined accepting her offer, abandoning the empire he had spent years building, confessing every hidden crime, and beginning again somewhere no one knew their names. The vision disappeared almost instantly. His entire world had been built upon loyalty, power, and fear. Walking away meant surrendering everything. Trusting Isabella meant accepting that the woman he loved had been reporting his every move for years. He could no longer separate truth from performance. "You should have hated me," he said quietly. "I tried. It would have been easier." "Nothing about loving you was easy." Another long silence followed. Outside, distant thunder rolled across the countryside. Adrian's breathing became uneven. "I gave you my trust. I know. My future. I know. My name. I never wanted your name. I wanted you." The words echoed through the room before fading into unbearable stillness. Something inside Adrian finally broke. The careful restraint that had governed every conversation disappeared beneath overwhelming despair and humiliation. Years of control collapsed under emotions he could neither understand nor contain. The confrontation that followed unfolded in desperate confusion rather than calculated cruelty. Raised voices became desperate pleas. Accusations dissolved into heartbreak. Isabella reached toward him, hoping to calm the man she still loved. Instead, tragedy overtook reason. When the struggle ended, silence consumed the room. Adrian stood frozen, staring at Isabella lying motionless across the polished wooden floor. The world around him seemed to stop moving. Even the rain outside felt impossibly distant. "No," he whispered. His voice trembled. "No. No." He slowly knelt beside her. "I'm sorry." The apology came too late. He reached for her hand, remembering the countless mornings he had held it while believing nothing could separate them. Now that familiar warmth was already fading. Tears filled his eyes. This wasn't supposed to happen. Every ounce of anger vanished, replaced by unbearable emptiness. He realized with crushing clarity that Isabella had been the only person who had ever challenged him without fearing him, questioned him without seeking power, and loved him despite discovering the darkest corners of his life. Whether her love had begun as deception no longer mattered. It had become real, and he had destroyed it. As evening approached, Adrian remained alone beside her, unable to leave, unable to undo the irreversible choice born from his own collapse. Far away, Detective Marcus Hale stared at repeated unanswered calls from Isabella's secure phone. A growing sense of dread settled over him. Without waiting another minute, he gathered the investigation team, convinced that the operation had crossed the point from dangerous to catastrophic, and fearing they were already too late. Detective Marcus Hale left police headquarters before dawn, driven by a certainty he could not ignore. Isabella had never missed a scheduled report without explanation. Her secure phone remained silent, her emergency contact protocols had not been activated, and every attempt to reach her ended with the same unanswered ringing. By the time the sun rose above the city skyline, Marcus had already requested an emergency briefing with the Organized Crime Task Force. Within hours, Isabella's disappearance transformed from a missing officer investigation into the largest organized crime operation the department had launched in years. The atmosphere inside headquarters shifted immediately. Investigators filled conference rooms, digital analysts examined encrypted files, and surveillance specialists reviewed months of archived footage. Every document Isabella had secretly collected became part of a rapidly expanding investigation that now stretched across multiple cities and countless businesses connected to Adrian Moretti's empire. Marcus stood before a wall covered with photographs, shipping records, financial charts, and handwritten notes. She knew this might happen, he said quietly. A younger investigator looked towards him. Did she leave anything behind? Marcus nodded. She planned for every possibility. Inside a secure evidence vault, technicians unlocked encrypted storage devices recovered from Isabella's hidden apartment compartment. One by one, years of carefully preserved information appeared on large display screens. Audio recordings captured coded conversations between senior members of Adrian's organization. Surveillance footage documented secret meetings previously dismissed as ordinary business gatherings. Financial records traced complex transactions flowing through shell companies before disappearing into offshore accounts. Individually, each piece suggested suspicion. Together, they revealed a criminal network impossible to ignore. Marcus listened silently as Isabella's recorded voice explained dates, locations, and relationships between individuals who had avoided prosecution for years. Even after disappearing, she continued guiding the investigation. Meanwhile, Adrian remained inside the countryside estate where silence had become unbearable. He had arranged for trusted men to remove every obvious trace connecting Isabella's final hours to the property. Security recordings vanished. Visitor logs disappeared. Personal correspondence burned inside the fireplace until nothing recognizable remained. Mobile devices were dismantled and scattered across different locations. Each action felt mechanical. None relieved the crushing guilt settling deeper inside him. Luca Romano watched carefully. "You need to leave," he urged. Adrian barely responded. "Changes nothing. It changes whether they arrest you tomorrow. They'll come eventually. Then don't make it easy." Reluctantly, Adrian returned to the city under heavy security, though his thoughts remained trapped inside the empty estate. Elsewhere, fear spread quickly throughout the organization. Rumors traveled faster than facts. Some believed Isabella had escaped with evidence. Others suspected Adrian had uncovered her identity. Nobody trusted anyone completely anymore. The uncertainty proved more dangerous than certainty itself. Several senior associates quietly contacted defense lawyers before speaking to investigators through intermediaries. One accountant secretly copied internal ledgers before disappearing overseas. Another manager surrendered confidential banking information in exchange for protection. Years of carefully maintained loyalty began collapsing beneath the instinct for survival. Marcus recognized the opportunity immediately. "They're panicking," he told his team. "Good. Pressure every weak connection." Search warrants multiplied across the city. Warehouses, offices, and luxury apartments filled with investigators carrying evidence boxes past waiting journalists. Television helicopters circled overhead while news stations interrupted regular programming to report developments involving Adrian Moretti's business empire. Public admiration transformed into suspicion almost overnight. Adrian watched the broadcasts from his office without changing expression. Every headline felt strangely distant. His empire was crumbling exactly as Isabella had predicted. Yet none of it compared with the memory that refused to leave him. He still heard her final words. He still saw hope in her eyes moments before everything ended. Power, wealth, and influence suddenly felt meaningless beside irreversible loss. Late that evening, Marcus received a forensic report confirming fresh evidence recovered from the countryside estate. He read every page without speaking. Finally, he closed the file and looked towards the investigation board. "We're closer than ever," he said. An officer asked quietly, "Closer to proving the organization?" Marcus shook his head. "Closer to proving what happened to Isabella." Across the city, Adrian stared through his office window at flashing police lights gathering in the distance. Sensing that both justice and judgment were approaching faster than he could possibly outrun them. The collapse began before Adrian Moretti realized how little control he still possessed. For years, his organization had survived because information remained hidden, witnesses disappeared, and loyalty was maintained through fear. But fear was temporary. Once the first people believed Adrian could no longer protect them, the foundation of his empire began breaking apart. Federal agents moved before sunrise. Across the city, heavily armed teams entered properties connected to Moretti's businesses. Luxury offices that once represented success became crime scenes filled with investigators, evidence boxes, and sealed documents. Warehouses that had operated for years without suspicion were searched from floor to ceiling. Financial institutions received court orders freezing accounts linked to complicated networks of companies. The empire Adrian had built through control was suddenly controlled by others. News cameras captured every moment. The same reporters who once celebrated his charitable donations now described him as the alleged leader of a criminal organization. His carefully designed public image disappeared within days, replaced by accusations involving corruption, illegal operations, and multiple violent crimes. Inside the investigation headquarters, Marcus Hale watched the operation unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. The evidence Isabella collected had changed everything. Her recordings revealed private conversations between Adrian's closest associates. Her financial records exposed years of hidden transactions. Her surveillance files connected individuals who had previously operated beyond the reach of investigators. Even after her death, Isabella was still fighting the battle she had started. One by one, Adrian's closest allies began making decisions based on survival rather than loyalty. Luca Romano was among the first to understand the situation. He had spent years beside Adrian, witnessing both his intelligence and his cruelty. But when investigators presented him with evidence showing the organization's full history, he realized protecting Adrian would only destroy his own future. During his testimony, Luca described the structure of the criminal network, explaining how decisions were made and how information traveled between different operations. Others followed. Accountants revealed hidden financial systems. Managers explained illegal business arrangements. Longtime associates admitted their involvement in exchange for reduced sentences and protection agreements. Each confession removed another layer of protection surrounding Adrian. By the time investigators approached his penthouse, there was nowhere left to hide. Adrian stood alone inside the office where he had once controlled everything. The same room where business deals were negotiated and enemies were defeated now contained only silence. When agents entered, he did not resist. One officer read the charges carefully. "Adrian Moretti, you are under arrest for organized crime activity, conspiracy, financial crimes, and multiple homicide investigations." Adrian listened without emotion. Years earlier, those words would have angered him. He would have searched for an escape, a negotiation, or someone willing to fix the problem. Now he simply looked beyond the officers, towards the city he had once ruled. All he could think about was Isabella. During the trial preparation, Marcus reviewed one final piece of evidence. Isabella's last recorded message, created as part of her emergency protocol. Her voice filled the quiet room. "If something happens to me, follow the evidence. Don't let anyone use my death as a reason for revenge. Let it become the reason the truth finally comes out." Marcus replayed the message several times. The words carried the same strength Isabella had shown throughout the investigation. they also carried the pain of someone who knew she might never see justice herself. When Adrian's legal team attempted to challenge the evidence, prosecutors presented a timeline that connected years of criminal activity with documented proof. The recordings, financial records, witness statements, and surveillance footage created an overwhelming case. The man who had spent his life avoiding consequences finally faced them. As Adrian was taken away from the courthouse, cameras captured his expression. There was no anger, no arrogance, only the quiet realization that the empire he built had disappeared, leaving behind nothing except the damage it had caused and the memory of the woman who had exposed it all. For the first time, Adrian Moretti had no power left to protect him. Months passed after Adrian Moretti's arrest, yet the city struggled to forget the story that had revealed the darkest corners of its hidden world. The headlines eventually faded, but the consequences remained. Businesses changed ownership, investigations continued, and families connected to the criminal organization searched for answers about years of corruption and fear. For many people, Adrian's downfall represented justice. For others, it represented a tragedy that should never have happened. Inside the prison walls, Adrian lived a life completely opposite to the one he had created. The luxury apartments, private vehicles, and endless influence had disappeared. He no longer controlled conversations or commanded loyalty with a single glance. The man who once terrified entire organizations now spent his days surrounded by silence. And in that silence, memories became impossible to escape. He often returned mentally to the smallest moments with Isabella. Not their arguments, not the final confrontation, the ordinary moments. Her laughter while preparing breakfast. The way she corrected him when he became too arrogant. The quiet conversations during late nights when the city outside felt distant. Those memories hurt more because they were the ones he finally understood had been real. For months he had convinced himself that her love was only another part of the investigation. Now he knew the truth. The deception had been real. The mission had been real. But so had the love. That was the punishment he could never escape. Adrian spent years believing power protected him. He surrounded himself with loyal followers, security systems, and carefully planned strategies. He believed fear prevented betrayal and control prevented weakness. Instead, those same beliefs destroyed the only person who had ever reached beyond his carefully built walls. His suspicion had become a weapon. His fear had become a prison long before he entered one. Meanwhile, Isabella's name became recognized across the country for her sacrifice. The police department held a memorial ceremony honoring her years of undercover work and the evidence she collected despite knowing the personal risks involved. Detective Marcus Hale stood before a crowd of officers, investigators, and Isabella's family members. She understood the danger, he said. She knew the cost of this mission, but she believed that protecting innocent people mattered more than protecting herself. Behind him, a large photograph of Isabella appeared on the screen. Not the undercover officer, not the investigator, just Isabella, the woman who had lived between two worlds and carried impossible burdens until the end. Marcus later visited her grave alone. He placed a small folder beside the flowers containing the final report of the investigation. "Everyone knows what you uncovered," he whispered, "but they will never fully know what it cost you." The investigation officially closed many months later, but those involved understood that victory felt incomplete. Justice had arrived. The criminal organization was dismantled. The truth was exposed. Yet no verdict could return the person who made that truth possible. During a final interview, a journalist asked Marcus whether he considered the case a success. He paused before answering. Legally, yes. And personally? Marcus looked away for a moment. Personally, justice came too late. Those words remained with everyone who followed the case. Because the investigation proved something more complicated than guilt or innocence. It revealed how secrets, power, and fear could transform love into destruction. It showed that even the strongest people could be trapped by choices made long before the final consequences arrived. Adrian Moretti lost everything because he could not accept a truth that threatened his control. Isabella Russo lost her life because she carried a truth too dangerous to reveal. Both were victims of a world built on deception. Years later, people still remembered the case as the downfall of a powerful criminal. But those closest to the investigation remembered something deeper. They remembered a woman who sacrificed everything for justice. They remembered a man who realized the value of love only after destroying it. And they remembered the painful lesson left behind. Truth can expose darkness. Truth can bring justice. But sometimes truth arrives after the moment when it could have saved someone.